just the guest I had on the other day, the IRS.
Sure.
Yeah, Sherry Peel Jackson. I mean, she did nothing wrong. And for her speech, look at Irwin Schiff in prison for a book in America.
Book burning. Book burning is alive in America. We don't burn them anymore. We issue injunctions against their publication and dissemination. And that's what the court issued against Schiff prior to the criminal trial. The court enjoined Schiff from printing and publishing his book upon pain of contempt. I mean, it's interesting that even the Library Association of America came out in support of Schiff on that point. And it's also interesting that in an age where court decisions have said that free speech covers books on how to stalk, torture, and kill people, how to identify and groom children for sexual abuse, and that's free speech. That stuff's out there, that's okay. But God forbid someone like Irwin Schiff wants to print his thoughts and research conclusions about the scope and nature of the tax. That's something you burn the book.
Well, I mean, he found the key to it and proved all their fraud after decades of research, and they said, you're going to a dungeon.
Yeah, and the other speech, the other types of speech that, I'm libertarian, but nevertheless, some of that speech is abhorrent. First Amendment covers that, but it doesn't cover Irwin.
Yeah, you have to protect the abhorrent stuff or we lose our good stuff.
That's right. There was a famous Supreme Court justice that made really a great, profound comment. We tolerate the speech we hate because someday our speech might be hated. So I'm good with that. I'm a libertarian. I believe in the principles of this country. But what we're having now is selective identification of speech that the state deems subversive, harmful, or dangerous. Back in the old days, frankly, we used to talk about our founders and the Middle Ages and then 1600s, 1700s, and there was torture going on in terms of criminal punishment. And now we're so much more civilized. And I don't think that's the case. In fact...
No, they just make it more sophisticated and more covers.
There's
right. More velvet gloves.
That's right.
What were we going to say? I interrupted.
No, it has a perception of being more civilized. But in fact, if you were a heretic before in the colonies, and you said something that they considered blasphemous, they'd put you in the stock for a day, a little public humiliation, and then they, repatriated you to your family and to your home. They had to live in a community. And today we're much more civilized. We try and put people like Joe Banister in federal prison for 15, 16 years.
And they're now grabbing people I've seen that have protested, the famous doctor case, Cell, up in Missouri, where he's been in there for 15 years now, forced drugged. Never having a trial, but he's in prison drugged for Medicare, Medicaid fraud, they claimed. I mean, now they drug you or electroshock you because of your views. That's like the old Soviet Union.
It's barbaric. It's absolutely barbaric. And when you take a look at the U.S. sentencing guidelines, which determines sentencing ranges, and we take a look at the so-called white-collar guidelines, particularly regarding tax, and you have people that, failed to pay a little bit of tax on a couple years of income, and the sentencing ranges can be 5 to 10 years in federal prison. Everything is upside down. You can be out of a state prison in California on a murder one charge, 6.9 years, something like that. But if you run afoul of the IRS, look forward to a double-digit sentence. And this is systematic. This is not, this isn't accidental. This is absolute intentional policy that's being passed by Congress, enforced by its agency, the Internal Revenue Service.
This guy ought to have a radio show. No wonder he's winning with all these juries. Hey, wow, amazing. Again, we have Joe Bannister and Robert G. Bernhoft, his incredible lawyer. You got to go to bernhoftlaw.com because I've followed your cases, and then I'm running around here with 20 things happening, and you guys are here, and then it kind of re-clicks. Joe goes, he's the guy that's won all these other cases too, and I'm just realizing how rare that is. Yeah. Why have you been so successful when very few others have? And we're going to skip this break because it's so important, guys. Go ahead.
Yeah, the conviction rate generally is around about body temperature in federal criminal trials, 95, 96%. Take your statistic. The way we approach these cases is, first of all, we have aggressive motion practice to get the discovery that our clients are entitled to. And there's various rules in cases. So we're very aggressive about getting discovery. And the devil's in the details, and the government's thematics and sometimes investigative misconduct lurks in the discovery. And then we prepare. It's about preparation, mastery of information, and it's also having an understanding of human nature. This is an age where we want to change human nature. We don't want to acknowledge it. We acknowledge the functions of human nature, how it plays out. And, court trials are theater dramatics where the stakes are very, very high. You have to understand what makes people tick. When you pick a jury, you have to look at those people as individuals, ask them a few questions, and they will tell you things about themselves without even realizing it. So jury selection, and Joe assisted me at counsel table with jury selection in his trial. And you have to have good people instincts, and you have to be aggressive, and you have to know the law. But picking a jury is crucially important, as it was in Joe's case.
And you're right, it is theater. People say, why do they do a year or 14-month $1 million investigation of Amish selling cheese and milk to their neighbors? Turns out the neighbors have moved in and demand they sell them their milk and cheese that their community's eating, so they could take it across state lines and sell it to make it a federal case. Then they SWAT team them and get them down on the ground when they're a known nonviolent sect for 400 years. And all of this goes on. People say, why do they do that? So they can show an ignorant jury who doesn't know what Amish are, doesn't know the history of anything, like, look, they're bad. We wouldn't have SWAT teamed them. And all of it is just dress-up theater.
Absolutely. Increasingly, you know, especially in tax cases, especially in non-filing, and I'm not afraid to say it, tax protester cases. I mean, I did a case in Boston a few months ago, and they were completing building the Tea Party Museum right there in sight of the courthouse. And so we took the government's epithet, its defamatory epithet, and we said, no, we'll accept that. That's right. My clients are principal tax protesters, and they're protesting taxation without explanation. Wrote letters to the IRS, asked for the code section that made them liable, no answers. And we reached that jury on a pretty good level. So it is drama, and increasingly these prosecutions are done by misleading the jury about things they don't know about, can't be expected to know, misleading the jury about tax law, about how accounting is done. And in Joe's case, of course, it's just the drumbeat that this guy's dangerous. If you don't convict this guy, he's going to get to the children.
But if we rediscover 1776, common sense says the government's dangerous.
Absolutely. We were very aggressive in Joe's trial. My co-counsel, Jeff Dickstein, did an incredible job. And he put to the jury, which side is the con on? Which side is the con on? They charged Joe Bannister with conspiracy.
Conspiracy.
Was that night? Conspiracy. And we put it to the jury. You cannot win these cases by half measures. You can't go in there with soft themes. I
agree. People say wake up America being nice. No, I never calculated anything. I'm aggressive like a bull in a china shop.
Absolutely.
That's what gets results, the truth.
That's right. And you have to break through the barriers of people from seeing the truth. And you look at Joe's case again. I mean, he was...
Did you go with this angle too? Because I followed the trial, some of the news, but was so busy, you know, was just following it in the paper and talking to Joe some on the phone, but I, don't have a little inside stuff. But I would have made the point, he was moving up. He had a career. He had everything. He just did this to warn people of the truth. Why would he lose everything? They're the liars.
That is a really interesting point, because the government's playbook in criminal tax is greed. You know, he chose to play, and then they point to the jury, well, you chose to pay. They create class economic envy and responsibility envy. They tried to trot that theme out in Joe's case.
Closing argument, especially.
Closing argument, yeah. Joe,
that you lost everything.
Yeah, he put everything on the line, and yet the greed was the function, the factor. It was extraordinary. It wasn't plausible, and the jury didn't buy it.
Did you tell the story how he set out to disprove the tax protesters?
Absolutely. There was tons of great testimony and evidence. And, of course, Joe, being a man of integrity, had former colleagues that were videotaped in a deposition talking about what a great special agent he was, the integrity, the discipline, the work ethic. So it was a tough go for the government.
And that was their evidence, but it blew up in their face.
That's right. They put the evidence of...
I find that more and more. They'll stand up a huge room of like 500 Marines, officers, and say, you will not watch Alex Jones. You will give people demerits and write them up, and we'll kick them out if they watch it 3 times. And then all of them go watch it and then tell everybody to watch. So the whole military's watching, because for 10 years they tell them don't watch it. Yeah. I mean, the system is so disconnected from reality, they seem to be their own worst enemy. Have you found that?
They are alienated from where America is really at. They are disconnected. They believe their own fantasies and the things they want everybody else to believe, and they just assume people believe that. But when you've got Joe standing up there with the New York Times investigative reporter and a Pulitzer Prize winner, and he's asking questions and taking notes, and Joe is expressing some views and beliefs that he has, the government thought this was sedition of the first order. This is subversive. And the jury looked at him and said, well, gosh, he's thoughtful. He's speaking his mind. I mean, that's a crime? And the government's theory was, in fact, that was a crime. That was a conspiracy to defraud the United States.
And your motto nails it. There's a war on for your mind. There's a war on for the juror's mind, because all that propaganda and all that conditioning all throughout their lives, the government just wants that to stick long enough to convict the defendant.
People like you.
But when you have somebody that can communicate your innocence, it snaps them out of that.
Let me ask you this, going through the fire, but also getting to defend people like Joe, because I've noticed you only take cases where it's really clear that the government's totally in the wrong there, and still that's an uphill battle. How good does it feel to actually find a niche in this increasingly corrupt world where you do get to do good work? Well,
I tell people all the time, I am an extraordinarily lucky individual because we actually make a difference once in a while. And even moving more transcendently from helping Joe out and his family and avoiding 15, 16 years in federal prison, that would be gratifying. But we do get to make a difference on a larger scale. That's a blessing in today's world. You don't get to do that very often. We take it very seriously. It's humbling. I'll tell you one thing, before the jury came back with the verdict in Joe's case, and I kind of leaned over to him and I said, look, I don't know where this is going. We've got a pretty good feeling, but win, lose, or draw, when that jury verdict comes in, we're going to be even keel. Don't let them do it to it. We're going to walk out of the courtroom one way or the other with your head held up high. You're entitled to that. They can't take that away from you. If it's a victory, we'll celebrate outside. And that was one of the most emotional moments of my life when that jury verdict was returned. That was
the special agent that investigated me. I want Bob to tell you what he said to Bob upon my acquittal.
Yeah, I came over to, I think it was Special Agent Breslin. There was Howard and Breslin. I went over to Special Agent Breslin, and he had tears running down his face. And he looked at me, and he said, thank you, counselor, for taking care of our boy Joe. And I was just...
Because there they are pretty much even having to testify against him. Imagine the guilt they were going through.
Yeah.
Because when you do evil things, it comes back on you.
That's right. And it was a political prosecution, political persecution. Everybody knew that. And those special agents that used to work with Joe, they knew he was a man of integrity. They knew he didn't have any intent to commit any crime. And so for that...
In fact, he didn't want to commit a crime carrying out the IRS stuff.
That's right. So he has a crisis of conscience. But knowing who Joe was, and that was unexpected. I did not expect that. To get a handshake and a congratulations counselor from one of the lead special agents, one of Joe's former colleagues.
Very exciting story. What about Wesley Snipes? You've had so many famous trials, and you got him, to not go to prison for all the fake stuff.
Yeah, that was a really tough case because, we were in Ocala, Florida. Everybody thought that he couldn't get a fair trial down there. It's going to be an all-white jury, and it was an all-white jury. But I picked that jury, and I like that jury. I thought I picked some really thoughtful people down there. And the problem with representing a high-profile celebrity is the fact of their high profile. Everything changes. It becomes surreal. There's an entourage. There was massive media down there, and everything gets distorted. So we actually had to try that case outside the courtroom as well as inside. That's the big difference between a non-celebrity.
Yeah, so many small-time lawyers who aren't, super professional like yourself, they're always, don't talk to the media. And I'm like, no, it's a media war. Oh. The prosecutors, they know that.
They're out there giving their press releases. Prosecution issued a press release that Wesley Snipes was a fugitive. And he was in Namibia shooting Gallo Walker, if I'm not mistaken. They don't have an extradition treaty at all with the United States. Wesley could have stayed in Namibia for a good long time. But his attorneys were negotiating with the government his surrender. So out there in the media, and the jurors here, potential jurors here, he fled. He's a fugitive. He won't come back. That's evidence of guilt.
That shows that fraud. They're saying he's a criminal. He's run when he hadn't.
We had to fight that. You have to go out to the media and dispel the misinformation and propaganda to get yourself back.